Hello, and welcome to the presentation called Leading a Successful Org, Financial Management 101. My name is Amy Prouse, and I'm the Director of Student Involvement. As a result of attending this training, you will be able to identify how to open a bank account for your student organization, understand how organizations can effectively manage their finances, identify resources on campus to help manage your org's financial processing. And lastly, you'll be able to apply the knowledge and resources gained in this training to successfully manage your organization's finances. First off, we'll discuss how to open a bank account for your student organization. Any organization can open a local bank account. To open a bank account, the organization leaders must first obtain an employee identification number, an EIN, from the IRS. Second, they must bring or email the EIN documentation to the Student Involvement Office to then receive a letter of recognition from our office. Once the org has completed the EIN reception and has obtained a letter of recognition from our office, you can take those two documents to the bank of your choice and talk with a banker about opening a bank account in the name of your student organization. Another piece of advice is to use your student organization's mailbox or advisor's mail stop number as an address to mail all of your bank statements to that address. It is not advised to use your personal address as the student organization's banking address. Student organizations are also responsible to apply for any type of tax exemption status. Student organizations are not automatically considered tax exempt, and at no point in time can student organizations use Texas Tech's tax exemption information. What makes an organization financially successful? Mainly, that is budgeting. When we talk about budgeting, we want to ensure that we are, as a student organization, especially as a treasurer and as an executive board, preparing a budget sheet at the beginning of each semester. Orgs might review previous budget sheets dating back at least 2 years to the current year to get an idea of how much they need to budget and for what things they need to budget for. You should also set realistic targets. Budgeted income should always equal or exceed expenses. You should track ongoing expenses and income in comparison to projected numbers. And the format should be consistent with financial reporting form. You should also break down expenses for operational costs as well as event costs. And lastly, you should obtain approval of the final budget from at least 2 officers or the advisor. This is a sample of a student org budget sheet. You can see that this is done in Microsoft Excel. You can see that the summary page is the first page, and we have a section called revenues, which is money that is brought into the organization. And we have a section in the red called expenses. That is money that leaves the organization, that the organization pays. And then we always keep up with the total that is in the bank account at one given time. You can see down here towards the bottom of the spreadsheet screenshot that we have various tabs. We see one titled membership fees, fundraising, grants, food, co-sponsorship, and then miscellaneous. This is just a sample, but it is advised that if you're going to start some type of budget sheet, that you look online or you look for a past budget sheet that your student org has used. And then it's always smart to break down your budget sheet into the topics that best apply to your student organization. The next topic we'll talk about is financial reporting and the treasurer's role. A financial report is a separate document from a budget sheet. And the treasurer is responsible for preparing financial reports throughout the semester and sharing these reports with the executive board and advisor. In these financial reports, the treasurer should list the income and expenses by major category. The format of this report should be consistent with budget reporting form and should break down expenses for operational costs as well as event costs. This form should also compare current year actual results to budget and prior year's actual results. Maintaining checks, purchases, and other expenses. If your org collects dues or receives any other type of org funding, you should pay attention to this slide. So let's talk about checks real quick. Checks should be restrictively endorsed for deposit only or the organization name upon receipt. When checks or cash are being used, the treasurer or whoever is handling money should ensure that checks and cash are secured in a locked area prior to them being deposited, and frequent deposits, at least on a weekly basis, if that often, are highly encouraged. When we talk about cash, you should always maintain cash receipt logs and record receipts in the checkbook. You should also consistently reconcile cash receipts to your bank statements each month. Let's move over and talk about debit and credit card use. So student involvement actually discourages the use of a debit or credit card because it's easier to commit fraud and to misuse organizational money with a debit or a credit card. However, if your organization chooses to use a debit or a credit card for various purposes, it is advised to ask your student org advisor to maintain this card in their possession and to use it only for purchases that cannot be made with a check. Now, we'll talk about cash apps such as Venmo or PayPal or any other app where money can be transferred between individuals or entities and then transferred into a banking account. So any cash apps, it's a need to be connected to the student org's bank account rather than an individual's personal bank account. That is not good ethical practice when it comes to managing organizational finances. It is not advised that a leader of an organization or the advisor of the organization ever use their personal cash app to mess with organizational funds. If your org sells goods or conducts business services and the revenue is more than $600 a year, per a new tax law that passed about 2 years ago, that income will then be taxed by the IRS. So please be aware when you are using cash apps that you're aware of tax law and you're aware of the types of goods and services that are being paid for and being exchanged within your organizational cash app. All right, when it comes to paying bills, it's best to establish a process to review and pay bills at least monthly. You should always pay bills with check or by invoice. You should never pay bills with cash. The second step would be to review vendor invoices and receipts prior to payments. The third step is to ensure that 2 officers sign all checks, before they are sent to the vendor that needs paid. And if necessary, an advisor can be the signer of a check also. Our fourth step is to maintain copies of vendor invoices and receipts after payment for verification that you actually paid that bill. Our next step would be to record checks in a checkbook on a timely basis. And then lastly, we always want to reconcile all checks or payments written to bank statements each month. Let's talk about taxes, specifically sales tax. So student orgs must be aware that they may be liable to pay sales tax on some fundraising efforts. University and student orgs will be exempt from taxes if the student org sale of taxable items lasts only 1 day and does not hold more than one of these sales per month. Org selling items more than once a month or for longer than 1 day must obtain a tax certificate number and then pay the appropriate sales tax on the item sold. So sales tax is collected on items and services such as amusement services like live performances or recorded performances on movies or plays or spectator sports. Items for resale are also sales tax collected items. Examples of items for resale could be shirts, posters, or decals. And then the rental of tangible personal property is also eligible to be collected, except for sales tax to be collected. This is just to reiterate also that no student organization affiliated with Texas Tech is permitted to use Texas Tech University's tax exempt information. Now, let's talk about tax exempt status. So national social fraternity and sororities are tax exempt under their parent organization as defined in IRS Code 501C. And these organizations should contact their national office for information on how to use their tax exempt number information. Orgs who are nationally affiliated may be tax exempt. So if we have organizations that are not considered social fraternities or sororities, but they are affiliated with a national entity, then that organization should reach out to their national entity to see how local organizations affiliated with that national entity may or may not be able to access the tax exempt status of that national entity. Orgs that are not affiliated with a national organization are more than likely not tax exempt unless they have, as an individual organization, applied directly to the IRS to obtain tax exempt status. If you're curious about what it takes to apply for your student organization to become a tax exempt entity, you can visit our student involvement website to find out more information on how and when you should file taxes for your organization, and to find information on what it takes to become tax exempt. All right, back to roles and responsibilities and talking more about the treasurer's role. So the treasurer has the responsibility of developing a budget sheet and managing all financial transactions for the organization. The treasurer should also prepare financial plans, budgets, and utilize the budget as a management tool. Additionally, the treasurer should provide members of the budget, should provide members a budget status on a regular basis and update all accounts on a monthly basis. The treasurer should also store and maintain account information in a confidential location, and the treasurer should approve all transactions. We want to make sure when we have the treasurer approving all transactions, we want to make sure that there is a checks and balances for the organization's funds so that all executive board members and the advisor are aware of what is being spent and where the money is going. Your org should be transparent always when it comes to financial management. Sorry about the calculator there. I hit a wrong button. All right, let's chat briefly about treasurer transition. So when you're electing a new treasurer, the current treasurer should complete the steps that we see here. The current treasurer should transfer the bank account to the incoming treasurer, which means that both the incoming and outgoing treasurer must go to the bank to make this transition happen. That's the easiest way to do it, but not all banks require both parties to be present there at the bank to make this happen. Advice for point number one would be to contact the bank where the organization's accounts are located and ask what is needed to make a name transfer from one individual to another. The current treasurer should also provide any supporting documents like an Excel spreadsheet that would show the closing balance for the account. And what that means, the closing balance for the account, it does not mean that you're closing the account at the bank. It means the closing balance for when the current treasurer left the position and the incoming treasurer took the position. The current treasurer should also provide a list of responsibilities that they think are important for the new treasurer to carry out for the success of the organization. Examples could be suggestions to attend SGA funding training, to contact the student involvement office to ensure that all compliance measures have been met so the student organization is eligible to apply for SGA funding, and etc. When performing outgoing duties, the organization will see a smooth transition for their financial management. Campus resources and funding. So we see 4 resources that exist on campus where student organizations can obtain advice on how to manage their funds, but then the 3 of these resources are actually entities that can provide funding for student organizations. So Red to Black is a program that assists students during one-on-one consultations and group presentations. And in these presentations and these consultations, the Red to Black experts can help create spending plans, can help with a plan to save money, and can talk about help using credit. The office is willing to help students and student orgs with managing their finances. If you're interested in sitting down with a financial planner for your organization, you can email redtoblack@ttu.edu. Another resource on campus, which is the most commonly known resource on campus for student organizations to obtain money from, is the Student Government Association. So SGA provides funding for all Texas Tech student organizations, except sport clubs, sports organizations like sport clubs that are recognized and receives funding from University Recreation, and law organizations. And by law organizations, we mean student organizations that are on the law school campus. If you have questions pertaining to SGA funding, I encourage you to reach out to Teresa Davis. Teresa's email is on the screen right here. I would also like to point out that the Student Involvement Office and the Student Government Association Office are completely 2 separate entities. Student involvement cannot answer any questions about specifics regarding the application for SGA funding and the allocation of funds. That is a question that you should ask the Student Government Association. Student involvement simply can give you the answer of if your organization has met all compliance matters to be an active student organization on this campus for the current academic year. Once you obtain that information from our office, then you can inquire about funding through the Student Government Association. Another form of funding is called Student Affairs Core Values Funding. Core Values funding is available for all student organizations, and this funding supports the strategic priorities of TTU and the university's core values. Core Values funding is a supplemental fund that is generally awarded to student organizations in addition to Student Government Association funding. The SGA office does control Core Values funding, and if you would like to apply for Core Values funding, you can email Mike Gunn, whose email is also on the screen. Another type of student organization funding is provided by the Division of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. DDEI provides funding to support student groups that provide programming on campus that is in line with the divisional mission and vision regarding the pillars of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So if your student organization is interested in speaking with an individual about this type of funding, you can email Jade Silva-Tovar at the email that you see on the screen. Fundraising. So to plan an effective fundraiser, you can follow some of the guidelines that you see on the screen. But you do need to identify who is your audience for this fundraiser, what is the goal of the fundraiser, what resources will the organization need to carry out the fundraiser, where will the fundraiser be held, and then you'll need to create a list of potential sponsors or donors who might participate in the fundraiser, but then want to give additional money outside of the fundraiser as well. In addition, after the fundraiser, you will need to evaluate how the event went. What went well about this event? What could you as an executive board do to improve the event for next time? And, did you meet the goal of the amount of money that you wanted to raise through this fundraiser? If there were any donors involved or any sponsors of the event, you definitely want to thank these donors and sponsors. If you're conducting a fundraiser, the organization must be clear that they must be clear to the audience and the donators and sponsors that the funds gained from this fundraiser will benefit the student organization only and not Texas Tech University. I'll also add that there's student involvement does not regulate fundraising activities for student organizations. If student organizations want to plan and carry out fundraisers for their org, that is completely independent of the university and of this office. However, when it comes to people donating large sums of money to your organization, to support scholarship or to support student development or the sustainability of that org on this campus, that is when you would need to reach out to our office so we can alert institutional advancement that they will need to get into contact with that donor. All right. Here's some quick tips as we finish up with this presentation. You should update the org's bank account information yearly. Keeping the correct bank account information on hand for the current treasurer, incoming treasurer, and the advisor is probably the most important thing. When we see, as an office, when we see trouble with finances for student organizations, it's generally because the new officers, the new treasurer, has no way to access the current bank account because the proper transition did not happen. And then it becomes a headache on the new executive board leaders, the advisor, and then the old treasurer and the old executive members are being bothered when they don't really need to be, because had transition happened correctly, the issue of changing names and updating the bank account information would not be a big deal. You should ensure, we do suggest that advisors, that student organizations put the advisor's name on their student org accounts, and we recommend this because the advisor does not generally change from year to year. It's the officers that change from year to year. And so if the advisor's name is on the student organization's bank accounts, that is a consistent and efficient way for someone to have access to that organization's money, regardless of who the treasurer is or what the transition between officers looks like. It's always suggested to just keep good financial records. You always want to keep financial records up from 5 years from the past. That gives incoming officers a great deal of knowledge about what finances have looked like for the student organization in the past. You also want to create a financial report for the org's executive board and advisor. A financial report, to be frank, should happen at every business meeting, especially every executive board meeting. You cannot be too transparent when it comes to organizational finances. It's also it's also good to be transparent with your membership about what your organizational finances look like, so the members have a realistic idea of events that could happen with the organization, which could make them want to be more involved, possibly. Another quick tip is to make sure to inform the incoming treasurer of any and all of any important documents and procedures needed to have a smooth transition of financial management. We highly recommend that the advisor be involved in the officer transition process, but especially the treasurer. But ultimately, the transition process does boil down to the outgoing treasurer and the incoming treasurer communicating with each other and working as a team. All right, so here is a section for questions. If you have watched this presentation and it has been helpful for you, great. If you've watched this presentation and it has helped you develop more questions that you feel like you need to ask, please feel free to reach out to the Student Involvement Office. You can email the office at studentorgs@ttu.edu. You can also call the office at 806-742-5433. So this was the presentation on Leading a Successful Org, Financial Management 101. I hope this was useful. Again, if you have questions, please never hesitate to reach out. We're happy to support you where we can. My name's Amy Prouse. I'm the director of the Student Involvement Office. And with that, that's the end. Thank you and bye-bye.